Okay, hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and I have got my grubby little paws on the three latest and greatest, what are we calling them? Handheld gaming PCs. We've got the Lenovo Legion Go, Steam Deck OLED, Asus ROG Ally, and I absolutely love all three of these. And just this whole new era of handheld gaming. I can take these on planes and trains, to bed with me. I don't have to sit over there at my desk with my desktop PC. Honestly, whichever one of these you buy, you're gonna be very happy with it. But the question is, which one of these is best? Which one should you actually buy? And as always, if you do find this video useful, a cheeky little like and subscribe down there would be lovely. Okay, so these guys do have a fair amount in common. We have these big, high refresh touchscreens, we get USB-C charging, headphone jacks, micro SD card slots for expanding your storage, dual joysticks, haptic feedback, and plenty of options for tweaking performance. And of course, they all play, well, PC games. But apart from that, they all actually are quite different. So let's start with this guy, the Steam Deck OLED, and I will reveal that I'm using a sticky light and some DJI microphones to actually hold it up, because this doesn't have a kickstand like this guy does, and I'm actually using a Tech Chat mug to hold this guy up. And the Steam Deck has kind of been the benchmark for these handheld PCs, right? I mean, it was the OG, it was the one that sort of spawned these new kids on the block, and now we have the Steam Deck OLED, which is essentially a Steam Deck 1.5. The new larger 7.4-inch 90Hz OLED screen looks fantastic. The battery life is significantly longer, up to double in some cases. We get more consistent performance, so games feel smoother, especially with that higher 90Hz refresh. We have a new 1TB storage option, and it's basically the same price as before. It is as comfortable to use as ever. Lots of people swear by these trackpads, especially for RPG games. And of course, with Steam OS and Steam verified settings and controls, it is by far the easiest just to pick up and play. This thing is great. Then we have the ROG Ally, and this is like the sleekest, the lightest, the most pocketable of the three, despite sharing the same size screen as the Steam Deck OLED. But this gets a sharper 1080p 120Hz IPS display, and like the Legion Go, these guys use the Z1 Extreme Ryzen processor from AMD, which is anywhere between 20 and 50% faster than the Steam Deck, although we'll come to performance in a second. And that's also partly thanks to a higher TDP that can scale even higher when plugged in. And after a recent price drop, it costs about the same as the Steam Deck OLED, although the storage does top out at 512 rather than a terabyte, although of course you can pop in a micro SD or even open it up and swap out the SSD. We get some nice go faster RGB. I do quite like the offset position for the joysticks, which we also get on the Legion Go, although the Ally does lose the touchpads and also a couple of rear paddle buttons versus the Deck. Although we do get this XG mobile connector port thing at the top here. Part of it is the USB-C, but there's also this XG mobile connector, so you can actually plug it into ROG's own GPU dock, external GPU, if you want to, well, just spend a ton more money and get better graphics performance. Although, of course, you will be bottlenecked by the CPU, but you have the option. Then we have the Legion Go, which is by far the biggest and also the most versatile of the three. The 8.8-inch Quad HD Plus 144Hz screen is faster, sharper, and about a third bigger, which makes a big difference to how immersive your games feel. Although this is a big boy, it might be too big. We have a kickstand, which I absolutely love, and I wish these guys also had. We have RGB thumbsticks, a single touchpad, plenty of paddle buttons on the back, and also a second USB 4 port, so you can actually charge and connect extra peripherals if you want to use this more like a desktop PC. Most impressive though, or at least most interesting, is the fact that we have these detachable controllers, very much like the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch, if I can pull it out, there we go. And obviously then you can put the kickstand out and game like this, but I do wish there was something we could connect these to, otherwise you kind of just have to, well, hold them like this. But this is certainly a unique feature compared to the rivals. But wait, there's more, because this is a puck. Drop a controller into it, and it becomes a sort of mouse for FPS games where you can shoot by clicking the scroll wheel on the back, or just navigating the desktop. It's a really unique and smart idea, although I'm not entirely sure how much I actually want to use it like this. So the Go is the biggest and the chunkiest and the heaviest, but it also kind of feels like the most well-made, the most sort of premium out of the three. But in terms of pocketability and the fact that these are supposed to be handheld gaming devices, I would probably say the most comfortable one is the Steam Deck, then the Ally, then this. But what about these screens? Well, I'll tell you, the first one you'll definitely be drawn to is the Steam Deck OLED. It is the only one of the three to have an OLED panel, giving you those deep inky blacks and rich colors and actually surprisingly impressive brightness. This can hit 600 nits in SDR and 1000 nits in HDR enabled games versus just 500 on the other two. And while it is only 90Hz, it's still a big upgrade over the 60Hz LCD on the old deck. And like the 800p 16:10 resolution, it's a good fit that does suit the power on offer, although obviously with the lower resolution you do lose some detail and you get more aliased edges and text can look a little bit grainy. Also exclusive to this 1TB model of the Deck OLED, we have this anti-glare etched glass, which is still pretty reflective. It does a similar job to what we have on the original deck, and to be fair, bright lights are less intense and a bit more diffuse than on the other two. It's kind of like going from a glossy to a slightly mattified screen, although you do lose a little bit of that OLED contrast. But the 16:9 1080p screen of the Ally, and especially the 16:10 1600p display on the Go, are just so much sharper, and it kind of makes it hard going back to the deck. They still get fairly bright, and colors and viewing angles look fantastic, but as I say, the Legion Go's much bigger screen is a sight to behold, and it gets the highest Quad HD resolution and the smoothest 144Hz refresh rate. And even if you choose to not game at their native high resolutions, and you drop the res to like 800p or whatever, or 720p, then the extra performance on tap allows you to crank up the graphic settings, so your games do end up looking better on these. Also 90Hz, 120Hz, 144Hz, so if you are playing older or less demanding games and you can get those higher frame rates, then it will of course look smoother on these as well. Now in terms of actually using them, the experience and how many times they want to make you tear your hair out, SteamOS on the Deck OLED is by far the easiest to use. It's so simple and easy to navigate, and you can access the Linux desktop via the power button, and from there you can install other game launchers or console emulators. Whereas Windows 11 on the Ally and the Go means we get better compatibility, it's easier to access non-Steam game stores, although definitely at the expense of a less slick and less curated experience. Windows really needs a dedicated handheld mode. Now to be fair, all three did experience sort of launch issues. With the Steam Deck originally, there just wasn't that many games that were optimized for this sort of handheld form factor. That's got better, especially with the Steam Door and this sort of verified list. With the Ally, annoyingly actually, when we reviewed this, like a week or two later, AMD pushed out a driver update which boosted the performance by like 10 to 20%, which was really annoying for everyone who'd reviewed it, but again, getting better with time. And the Legion Go, this is the most recent to launch, and it does have some problems. We've got dead zone issues with the touchpad and the controllers, we've got the sort of orientation problems, full screen issues with it, and a fair amount of crashes and games that simply don't work, although that also applies to the Ally as well. It will get better with time, but certainly early adopters have had their fair share of issues with all three, although I think right now the Go does need a few tweaks. So it might be worth holding out on this guy a little bit for more updates to come out, and also for the price to drop a little bit. So the Ally has the Armory crate, and we have Legion Space on the Go, both acting as hubs for all your settings and your linked game libraries, and from here you can open the relevant launchers, including SteamOS. Outside of Steam though, you do miss the control compatibility modes, which Valve implements in its deck verified and playable list of games, and their curated Great on Deck list really helps to know how well a given game will work on a handheld. And in each case, there are unsupported games or games that simply won't work at all, so it is worth checking to see if your favorite game has decent support. And you can use any of them like a more traditional desktop PC if you wanted, although obviously we've got Linux here, Windows 11 on these two, and if you hook them up to a compatible dock and maybe video out to a monitor, you can plug in other USB peripherals, maybe an RJ45 Ethernet, and turn them into a bit of a PC. And also, these things are a great way to emulate your old console or ancient PC games. And EmuDeck is a great place to start and is designed for the Steam Deck, but it does work on the others. Okay, let's talk about performance. And straight away, these two are at an advantage because they have the much newer, more powerful AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor. Although technically the Ally does come with the regular Z1 as an option, it's a bit cheaper, but I would probably avoid that. And roughly speaking, it's 20 to 50% faster than this guy. The Steam Deck OLED does use the same processor as the original one, but it's now on a more efficient, smaller 6nm process, so it's more efficient, a little bit cooler, runs more consistently smooth, and I'll come to that in a second. But certainly in terms of raw performance, these guys are definitely out in front. To give you a rough idea, both are good for 30 to 40 FPS in the latest AAA games at Full HD with medium settings. And in fact, they can manage 1080p at about the same frame rates as the Deck OLED can, running at 800p. They also offer different power modes. Now, I tested the Steam Deck OLED with its 15-watt performance mode versus a custom 15-watt mode, which is similar to the default balance mode on the Ally and the Legion respectively, as I reckon this gives you the best balance of frame rate and battery life. But obviously you can change and tweak this, whereas the Deck OLED's performance is fixed, so games will run the same no matter what. So, kicking off with Cyberpunk in Steam Deck mode, the Ally and the Legion's performance were basically the same, though the Deck OLED wasn't that far behind at 800p. In Spider-Man Remastered, both the Legion and the Ally kept frame rates above 60 at 800p, using FSR2 balanced in default custom mode, which is a solid 12 FPS ahead of the Deck. So I reckon 1080p on the Ally and the Legion is best here. It's sharper, you get a lot more detail, but you're still getting a very playable mid-40s frame rate, although I did see some frame dips, especially on the Legion. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 is pretty demanding, and it's much more playable on the Ally and the Legion, although perhaps not at their higher resolutions like 1600p on the Legion. But it's still very playable on the Deck, and the OLED screen looks fantastic. But then in Rocket League or any other less demanding game, it really shows how much higher refresh rates can make a big difference. Because at 720 or 800p, I'm getting 120 FPS on the Ally and the Legion, which just looks and feels great. F123 performance was solid, and by the way looks amazing playing on a handheld like this. Racing games in general work really well on handhelds. And lastly, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the Ally and the Legion's frame rates were about the same and around 23% higher than the Deck can manage, even on low settings at 800p. But crucially, on the Ally and the Go, I can crank the TDPs up to 25 watts, giving me up to a 50% increase in frame rate versus the Deck across the board, although at a serious cost of battery life. Although on any of them, you can limit the frame rate to 60 or 30, especially in more demanding games, to avoid the bigger frame drops. And also, if you can play plugged in, definitely do it, because turbo mode boosts the power from 15 up to 25 watts on the Ally and 30 watts on the Legion Go, where performance is improved massively, and it feels almost like you're getting a full gaming laptop experience. Now, obviously being handheld, portable gaming devices, battery life is pretty important as well. In terms of the size of the batteries, these guys have a 50 watt-hour cell, this is 40 watt-hours. So the Ally has the smallest battery, and it does last the least amount of time. But without question, the best battery life is the Steam Deck OLED, partly because it has the bigger cell, like the Legion Go, but it's just simply not as powerful. And also it's on that smaller, more efficient 6nm chip compared to the original Steam Deck. For example, in Wreckfest, the Deck OLED managed a massive 3.5 hours versus just under 2 hours on the Ally and 2 hours 10 on the Legion Go. Although dropping down to quiet and balanced mode added an extra 50 and 30 minutes respectively, but then the gameplay was a lot choppier. And in each case, limiting the refresh rate to 30 FPS extends the battery life massively. Do that in a less demanding game on the Deck OLED, and I reckon this will get you to 4 hours. And breathe. Okay, let me wrap this up. Which one should you buy? Well, I'm just gonna go and say straight away, I do really like this. I think it's the most versatile. I love the kickstand, detachable controllers, the puck thing's a cool idea, and that big screen is a sight to behold. It's lovely, don't get me wrong, but it's just too expensive. Because this is just launched, it's about £200 thereabouts more than these guys. And also there's quite a few bugs and issues. So I reckon I would give this a little bit of time to mature, come down in price a touch, and then it'll be a lot more competitive and could end up being the best one. But right now, this would probably be my third place option. So it really is a toss-up between these two. And then it's a question of how much do you value the slightly sleeker, nicer design, the much better screen, much better performance of the Ally versus the very nice OLED display and also the much longer battery life and arguably the smoother, nicer experience of SteamOS with the Steam Deck. I would say for most people, this is your best bet. It's just a nice, smooth, easy experience, but if you want a higher-end gaming experience and easier access to non-Steam game libraries, then I think the ROG Ally is probably the best all-rounder, and right now I would say is the one I would buy. It's not perfect, they all have pros and cons. I think for most people, the Steam Deck OLED is the one to go for, but I would probably pick this for now. Hopefully, we see this drop in price soon. Although if you do get the Deck OLED, I reckon the 1TB model is worth paying the extra 90 quid, as you're getting double the fast SSD storage, also that anti-glare coating, and the case comes with a liner that doubles as a more compact travel case. And again, for the Ally, I would definitely go with the Z1 Extreme model. But which one would you go for out of the three? And if you already own one, share your experience in the comments below. And also, what would you love to be different about these in 2024 with the Gen 2 versions that could tempt you to upgrade? Thank you so much for watching, guys. Again, if you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be fantastic. And I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.